Hey there, and welcome to the podcast Tiling Connect, hosted by Mark Moskwa. This show is designed to connect people with the best information intended to strengthen the business of tiling. To keep up to date with all the episodes, don't forget to subscribe.
Today's episode is brought to you by RLA Polymers and Gripset. For peace of mind when waterproofing, trust Gripset's 38FC, the king of membranes. 38FC has been the industry benchmark for years and is rigorously tested internally and through certified NADA laboratories, giving you verified peace of mind. Developed alongside contractors, 38FC has confirmed coverage of 10 square metres per pale and adheres to AS 4858 and AS 4654 compliance. With a quick 1 hour recode time, you can get the job done in record speed without compromising on quality. Don't fall for the copycat products. Trust Gripset's 38FC, the king of membranes. Hey everybody, Mark here from Tiling Connect. Welcome back to the program. More importantly, welcome back to another episode. Very lucky and fortunate to have another amazing industry guest with us today, as we like to call everyone rock stars, because we all are, right? And I've got Grant Dziurek from Melbourne joining us in the, well, I would call it a studio. And he's from GD Houseworks and Sealworks Waterproofing. Grant, welcome to the show today.
Good afternoon, Mark. How are you? Pleasure to be here, mate. Honoured to be a guest on your podcast, and a big fan of what you're doing within the industry, mate. It's innovative, and it's setting the trend. So pleasure to be here, mate.
Awesome, buddy. Thank you, and appreciate those kind words. And we're sort of grateful that you've given up some time today to learn more about you and how your journey unfolded within the construction game. And I know that a lot of our guests love to hear from contractors and business owners and entrepreneurs and people that are making a difference in their own backyard and how they can apply some little golden pieces of magic into their business as well. So should be a fantastic little bit of time in front of it. What got you into the construction industry, and how did you get your first start as a carpenter or a chippy? I know a rope carpenter, but Australia, we acronyms for everything.
It's a universal term, isn't it? It's you go from one end to the other. But I guess my interest early days was through my father. He was, I guess you'd call him a carpenter, and did a lot of home maintenance and smallish renovations up until I was about sort of 13, 14 years old. And he was really inclusive in everything that he did. So I essentially, I couldn't avoid being around my dad building and fixing things and having power tools going pretty much every weekend. So, and he really, I vividly remember him spending a huge amount of time teaching me how things worked and how things operated and what they did. And so I guess I owe the basis or the foundations of my carpentry skills or my interest in carpentry to my father. And I still use many of things that he's taught me today. But in answer to your question a bit more specifically, I'm a mature age carpenter. I only got into carpentry in the sense of the word in 2017 after going through a big life change that was very much needed and necessary. But I come from a sales and marketing background, having spent 16 years as a national sales and marketing manager in the manufacturing industry for gas cooking appliances. So we made or manufactured gas appliances for BSH Holdings or Bosch Siemens. People know them. So yeah, essentially I've been in sales my whole life, and in 2017 there was many reasons why I needed to take a step back and have a look at myself and my life and evaluate, I guess, what was important to me and what made me happy. And that didn't make me happy, I realised. And I think that's a common thing in this day and age, is that people sort of settle or they become complacent, I guess, in what they do. And It took me about 6 months to nut it out. And it was a very challenging process. But at the end of it, I realized I was not going to don a suit again. And I didn't want to do that every day. And carpentry just came to me. I had renovated a few houses prior to that with the help of my dad and some friends as well that were in the construction industry. And I was lucky enough to have a friend, my son's father, who was a single parent. He was in the construction game in a family business, more so in the commercial construction industry, but they were DBU licensed builders. And I got my first gig with them, essentially. He reached out and had known him for a few years, and they took me on board for about 18 months. So I got my experience with a DBU builder, and did a few projects as lead carpenter there. And in 2019, so a couple of years later, I birthed GD Houseworks. I started to go out on my own. Was doing a little bit, I guess, a little bit here and there, I guess, on the side. But in 2019, at the start of, I decided it was time for me to give it a crack. And away we went, I think, in about April. So, but what came with that is the following 4 or 5 years were pretty hectic and full on with study. So I was sort of trying to run a household as a single parent, trying to grow and start a business, a viable sort of sustainable business as well. And I wasn't qualified at that point either, which makes it very difficult if you're trying to grow a business in a trade business. So I went to school, and I spent 4.5 years getting my Cert 3 in carpentry, followed by my Cert 3 in waterproofing. I did a diploma of building and construction in that time as well, and also wrapped it up with a DBLC license as well, limited. So, and I'm currently still studying. I seem to not be able to get out of it in training, a Cert 4 and training assessment. So, yeah.
When you find time to live?
That's one of the issues, Mark, to be honest. It's all about balance, and I don't do that overly well. So, hopefully we get into a bit of that a bit later on. But it's been at, I guess, at the detriment or at the expense of many other things. And it is a package, isn't it, really? So it's work in progress, I guess. But that's essentially how I got my start. And I love being on the tools, and I love carpentry. I guess I've always been good with numbers, and I've been good with things like levels and angles and volumes and things like that. So calculations or formulas like that. So, and there's a sense of that creation, I guess, the freedom. And I hear previous guests in your show that run tiling businesses talk similar, that, they have that freedom to be able to create something and be a part of something and see a result, I guess. And I'm very much, I get a lot of satisfaction from that. So, and it's about, even finding solutions for people that might not think out of the box or don't think things are possible. They really are. I mean, I've built my business on trying my best not to say we can't do it or no, because there really isn't much you can't do. It's just how deep your pockets are, essentially. But you can do just about anything.
In that time, I mean, obviously you've jammed a lot in from 2017, 2019 onwards over a very short period of time. What have been one of the biggest challenges that you've faced in that period of going from, a sales-based position transitioning into the production industry, which is, let's be honest, we're talking chalk and cheese here in terms of backgrounds.
Totally.
And you then starting your own business. So what's been the big challenge, and how did you overcome it?
I think without doubt, it's been that self-regulation and the integration of certainly. It might have been a little bit different, I guess, if I had spent a huge amount of time in the construction or early days in the construction industry, working for someone else and not for myself, essentially. So I kind of skipped that step, when I was a national sales manager, that they were quite a big organisation, and you knew your hours that you had to work, and you didn't really care when it come 4:30 on Friday afternoon. It was, phone was off, and it was as simple as that. So I guess, I really struggle, and I still do today and I struggled early on as well. And I don't know how much it's really improved, but is that separation between personal life and work life, and prioritizing yourself and your personal life as well, and your family and kids and all other things, without sort of getting the blinkers on. So I guess that was the biggest issue or challenge I had with the transition, and it's still in transition, Mark, because I don't think I'm doing much better, to be honest. Maybe a little bit, and I guess I struggle. It's discipline, isn't it? In a way, it's kind of, I struggle to shut off, and I struggle to time manage and schedule and things like that. And that hit me really hard. I've been, yes, I might have built, a successful business or two-part business, and those things are great. And, and I'm very proud of that, but it has definitely been at the expense. I've been hectic for 7 years on the trot, or coming up to 7 years, and it's been pretty frantic, and that certainly needs to change, because it's not sustainable. But that would be the biggest challenge. I mean, I think that in a lot of senses, I think my career, or my working life as a national sales and marketing manager, really paid dividends when it came to business as a tradie or as a carpenter initially. And that was because, there's a lot of people out there that can swing a hammer and rip some timber. But yeah, really, if you're in business for yourself, you really need to sell yourself. The same principles apply.
100%.
Yeah. Before you even swing a hammer, if you sell yourself and stand by and back who you are and what you're about, you've got it made. And it's amazing in the industry how, I think across the board in the construction industry, if you just listen to what the bulk of the pool sort of says, they're just after people that are reliable, that follow through and do what they say they're going to do, that are fair and have fairly decent quality workmanship. And it's not rocket science, is it? So
no.
Yeah, so I was lucky.
And you've touched on some really important things there. And trust and reliability are two of the biggest things that people need to carry in life, that will get them ahead more than any other thing that you have.
Than any skill trade.
Yeah, but people still, it's so rare to find both.
Yeah,
let alone one.
And it makes it, if I could give, while the opportunity is there, any advice to anyone sort of starting out in the construction industry, it makes it so easy, because you're already sort of in front of everyone else if you just do the basics. It's, when I was sort of doing my due diligence or research into expanding into waterproofing, I spent probably about 8 months researching, thinking, trying to make an educated decision. Was this going to happen or not? And was it going to work or not? And I really just started to ask a lot of questions, and I listened to and it was just the same things over and over again. People, trades replying to clients or customers, but not showing up, saying they'll call them later and not ringing, saying they'll send a quote through within a day or two. A week later, there's nothing there. It's really, really simple. And if you just do the basics, you've got it made. It's not that difficult. So,
look, a question I had for you though, we talk about carpentry and that particular trade, and then you made the transition into waterproofing.
Yeah.
Why waterproofing? What was the attraction there?
That's a really great question. I guess it's sort of two parts. It must have been around 2022, about mid-22. where, sort of I'd established GD Houseworks and I'm not a big operation by any stretch. But I think by not chance, default, let's just say, a lot of our jobs that were coming through were either bathrooms or balconies. And I wasn't looking for that job in particular. We do all aspects of carpentry, from framing, right through to finished carpentry. So, but I would say 70 to 80% of the inquiry, certainly in the southeastern suburbs of Melbourne, that were coming through to us were balconies that were leaking, so water ingress, or damaged bathrooms through water damage. And when you sort of start to do that quotation process or try and find out solutions to fix that, the numbers get pretty high. The job numbers get pretty high. Sort of people do backflips, I guess, and they're in shock. And then when you get sort of, to 80% of the price, and people realize, well, I can just gut the whole bathroom, or I can just tear down the whole balcony and rebuild it with new tiles and new cladding or new rendering for another 20% of the price. We found ourselves doing full bathroom and balcony rebuilds. And it wasn't, as I said, because I'm not a big operation, it wasn't a huge amount, but I think in 2022 we did about 8 balconies and probably a dozen bathrooms, which pretty much filled most of the whole year, with waterproofing. As you know, you've got curing times, and winter can be an absolute nightmare. So, and I was just sort of, as I said, I have a strong interest in research. I find research very interesting. You never stop learning in this world. And so I'd been doing, I guess you'd call it self-taught research. And at that time, a lot of, and it's still very much like it is today, certainly in Victoria, every tiler and his dog was waterproofing, because, and even I must admit, in 2021, I thought, well, they're the waterproofers, right? So they're the ones that are the pros at waterproofing. But that's not, as we know now, not quite the case. But
especially in Victoria.
Very much so in Victoria, and I'm a big supporter of that changing as quickly as possible. But and I had seen, been around for having been in the industry for 3 or 4 years at that point. I'd seen some pretty questionable applications, and one of the worst I saw was a tiler using house paint as waterproofing membrane, blue house paint. So that it kind of, and the customer was none the wiser, and it was disbelief, really, to be honest. And during sort of that first 18 months of doing that, sort of, let's just say 20 odd bathrooms and balconies, there weren't too many older properties that we were working on. They were all, when I say older, they were all within sort of 25 years from being built. So they were relatively sort of newish anyway. And I would say half of them at least had either no membrane at all or waterproofing system whatsoever, even on exterior, or a complete nightmare of a waterproofing system that would have been ineffective from day one anyway. So, but the amount, I think that in 21, 22, we pulled down about 8 balconies that had no waterproofing. They were exterior, they were tile adhesive on exterior ply with nothing in between. And these are 8, I think most of those were around the estates around here, sort of between 15 and 20 years old. And that really, that got my goat. That's the best way of putting it. I when it happened month in, month out, I couldn't let it go. I just, I really connect with customers as well. And I started to feel sorry for them. They had been duped. They really had, they'd either built this property or they'd purchased it fairly new. And, the balcony's falling down, the plaster's falling down at the front door. And then when we go and pull it up, you can't even stand on it because it's just, the substrate's just completely rotted out. So, and we've got some photos online there of, some tear downs that we did. And it is unbelievable, the thing.
Is it getting better? Like, are you seeing, like, I mean, I know that's a tough question to answer because you're literally being called out to jobs that are, let's call it for what it is, just a complete shit show.
Yeah.
And, yeah. So are we seeing an improvement across the sector, through conversations with other contractors and tradies and builders, and are people waking up to the fact that, we really need to focus more on quality and less on just on taking shortcuts?
Another great question, Mark. We definitely, yes, it is improving. It's improving slowly through the hard work of, some industry leaders, and you've had a few of them on your show already. They're kind of fighting a bit of an uphill battle. One of the biggest issues that we have, ongoing issues that we have is that education. That there's still not the importance put on waterproofing. The figures are there, that say that it's something like 80 or 85+% of all building insurance claims are due to water damage or water ingress into the building. So it is that is a massive, and it far outweighs any other claim whatsoever as far as DBI insurance and homeowner insurance. So, but yet less than 1% of a new build contract price is set aside for a waterproofing system. So that when you look at when I look at that, I look at sort of a set of scales, and I sort of say, well, is it sort of is the ratio right? I mean, does it weigh up? And it clearly doesn't. And to the point where there is just the scales don't move. It is that far out of whack. That's the reason why you've got DBI insurance. You've got even your end user or home insurance. The insurance companies are just not going to do it too much longer, basically. And so we can't keep, and everyone suffers because the insurance premiums go up like you wouldn't believe because they're all paying for this defective stuff. So, and that leads into obviously to the mandatory licensing, that we're talking about, and that should happen. But the industry leaders, Steve Beaumont down there at Chisholm, and you've got Chandy at manufacturer, and I'm not pointing out anyone in particular, Byron, and even Steve Gresh there at doing the training. So these guys are industry leaders, and I respect them highly because they're the ones that are pushing exactly what you're talking about, the improvement through the industry. And, as I consider myself, right down sort of not at the bottom of the barrel, but, at the forefront, but the soldier, so to speak. And every job that we go out and quote, or we provide advice on, or that we're contacted about, it's really a double job, because whether or not it's a builder that's looking for a subcontractor, a qualified waterproofer to come in and do a job for them, or whether or not it's a customer looking for a waterproofing job or a complete bathroom or what have you, and then you get to this waterproofing part of it, and there's just this confusion to start with. And then there's this, depending on who you're dealing with, this strong opinion of how it should be done, what should be done, what shouldn't be done. And the fact of the matter is that most people don't have great understanding of where it's at right now and what the requirements are as far as compliance and at minimum standards and performance requirements. So you spend 2 hours trying to nut that out to get on the same page before you can even throw a quote at anyone, and it's just, it is just, one of the big differences between, let's just say in my case, between carpentry and waterproofing is without doubt, care and attention to detail and prep. So they're worlds apart. Carpentry I see has been very ingrained. So systems in carpentry, the build methods and construction methods in carpentry have been around for a long, long time. People know how to shoot nails into framing and all that sort of stuff. But with waterproofing, it really is kind of an art in a way. And the care that needs to be taken is worlds apart from and tolerances is worlds apart from carpentry. So and the best way to look at it is essentially with a waterproofing system as the barrier or the last man standing between the elements and water ingress into a building. Should it be tested and need to be tested at down the track at some point, you get one shot at it because as we know, the viscosity of water is very unforgiving. And if it wants in, it'll get in. And you've got one shot, meaning as in if it fails, everything's got to come out and be redone. So there's no quick fix. I'm not a big fan of remedial waterproofing at all. And we talk about continuous membrane systems and things like that, and that makes perfect sense to me. So remedial stuff is it has its place, but we tend not to focus on that. And that brings in a whole other thing, as far as longevity and warranties and things like that. But I think as a whole, it is improving, but it's a real uphill battle. For the people that come into the industry 5 or 10 years from now, they're going to reap the benefits of these industry leaders at the moment that are really, really doing the hard yards. And they're not the only ones. Other parts of the industry have or any business has seen it. But they're fighting an uphill battle, and I'm a big supporter, but it is gaining momentum, and there's more people, I guess. It got through to me. It worked on me. These people worked on me. They hit the button with me, and I'm not alone. I'm not alone. That whole concept, and I hear it talked about, but also on your show in the past, it's my way or the highway. At the moment, if a waterproofing system fails, it falls on me. It does.
100%.
So you go in and you tear down a balcony, external waterproofing application, you tear it down, you rebuild it. Being a carpenter as well, we rebuild it. We do the rebuilding and then all the way through to the finishing of it. Let's just say the customer's paid $35,000 for this balcony rebuild. If it fails in 18 months, 3 years, 4 years, the whole thing's got to come down again. Certainly the substrate and everything, the cladding's got to come off. It'll get behind the render. That'll start bubbling and peel. You name it. It's a nightmare. And that's got to come back to me, and the product manufacturer that I use, or the manufacturer of the product that I choose to use, that connection, it plays a huge, huge role, because essentially, it is that link between them. So, and chances are their product, if you've chosen a good manufacturer to run with, and we talk about, and you've spoken about this on your show before, about systems and sticking and nutting them out and having because it's a confidence game, 100%. And you've got to know what's behind you and what's in front of you. And it's rarely going to be, if you choose one of those reputable brands, it's really going to be a product fault. It's going to be your fault, and you're going to be the one to fix it. Otherwise, you're going to find yourself in VCAT, or you're going to find yourself in some real deep water. And you're not talking about, $3.5 You're talking about $35,000.
A quick word from our sponsor. Partner with Gripset and become one of Australia's leading waterproofers. Waterproofing is one of the most in-demand trades. With Gripset's accredited practitioner program, GAP, you'll be trained and certified in just 3 days. Backed by Australia's leading waterproofing supplies manufacturer and run by trainers with over 20 years of experience within the industry, GAP gives you a wealth of knowledge. Learn how to identify and prevent dampness and water damage in both residential and commercial structures by exploring the current Australian waterproofing standards, correct preparation of substrates for waterproofing, and how to apply both sheet and liquid membranes with a particular focus on the trickier areas such as joints and penetrations. Upon completion, you will be a fully accredited GAP applicator and will be able to access exclusive benefits and free business advertising to expand your clientele. Spots are filling up fast. Upskill today. Visit gripset.com/gap. That's gripset.com/gap, where great applicators get even better. A big part of my belief, a big part of the construction piece, particularly when it comes to trades and contracting and doing work for consumers, is ensuring that the consumers are educated as well about the process, about the pricing and the why things are the way that they are. And I think that I've seen countless examples of where, and I've had conversations with consumers where they're at the end effect of a bad project. And I won't mention specifics, but they'll ring me as a consultant and want some advice on what to do. One of the first questions that I ask them is, do you have a contract with the contractor? And they're like, no. And I'm like, why not?
Yeah, how do you know what you're getting?
How do you know what workmanship they're actually going to be fulfilling for you on that project? Yeah. And essentially, we're having a conversation now with me as an industry consultant. You're talking about going to VCAT, QCAT, wherever it might end up being, and that wait today can be 2-3 years before you before you get seen by a judge. And then they're going to ask the same question: why don't you have a contract with the contractor? Like, why did you enter into an agreement for them to do work, and you have nothing in writing?
Yep, that's exactly right. It's there every day. We deal with it every day, every single day. You know, but
it's to protect both parties. It's not a he said, she said discussion. It's there in writing so that both the expectations for the consumer and for the contractor or builder are all clearly outlined, and the work gets done in accordance with that. Like that's right.
The basis is binding, right? So it's a binding contract. So it's that accountability on both sides, you know. So, but you said it perfectly. It happens all the time. It still happens. It's not only frustrating, it can be really disheartening as well, because you know, where does the responsibility lie? Essentially, you can't possibly look at the customer and think that the customer should lead the way here. You know, they're paying the party here. You know, that they're essentially reaching out to pay for your expertise and to pay for your. They can't possibly know the ins and outs, certainly of things like waterproofing. I mean, they who knows? They probably work in an office or in finance. How would they know about construction and waterproofing? And there is that because of certainly when we look at the waterproofing part of things, there's just not enough knowledge out there. You know, let's face it. In Victoria, if you hold a DBE license, you can sign off on waterproofing. Now, this is not something I think's a good thing at all. No. Look, there's a huge amount of DBU builders out there that have never swung even a hammer in their life. So, you know, they're not necessarily a qualified carpenter or tradesperson to start with. So that I have issues with that as well. But I can also see the other side of things. But certainly when it comes to waterproofing, when we talk about those numbers, which I spoke about earlier, that's not right. That's just not right. You can't sign off on something that is clearly has a history and still evident today is clearly very, very wrong and not working, and be able to sign on the dotted line. I mean, in Victoria as it stands at the moment, we don't even need to issue a mandatory certificate of compliance. We have none. If you want to issue one, you write it on the back of a serviette or I'll print it out on Microsoft Word. And it is crazy when you talk about multi-billion dollars paid out in insurance claims in relation to water damage or water ingress in buildings. You're like, this is just not adding up. It clearly is not adding up. So, but as it stands at the moment, it's still that way. And where we are in business at the moment is a tiler can still do it. It's not a requirement. You can still get DBI building insurance, a builder without the requirement of a certificate of compliance or a qualified waterproofer. You can still have your home insurance with AAMI, go and renovate your 3 bathrooms in your house. They all look sparkling and showroom style, that they're waterproof to shit, essentially, in not a good way. And AAMI are not going to ask you for a waterproofing certificate before they send you their policy and all that sort of stuff, So soon, which just it's mind blowing to think that it's like that. And the thing is that I talk about how slow it is to catch up. That this has been happening well before I was even in waterproofing. So he's talking about some of these these guys in the industry that are leading. They've been seeing this for a long, long time. So what gives, essentially?
Let's talk about. Let's quickly touch on some other things if we can. Yes, for a moment. Let's talk about. Obviously Melbourne's construction scene is pretty competitive. It's one of the largest cities in Australia. There's a lot of people. I think 4.5 million people.
Something like that.
In
enough
Melbourne,
traffic.
And then,
yeah. That's
traffic.
a nightmare.
How have you gone about building a name for yourself in as a mature age new tradesperson?
Integrity, man. It's as simple as that. It's I can't put it any other way. We have some business principles that we sort of that I guess I've always applied to my working life anyway. But it all really comes down when you peel back, sort of the layers of the onion. It's just about integrity. Be a person of integrity. Do what you say you're going to do. Take pride in your work. Be fair. And back yourself. I was taught early on in my sales career to know your competitor's product better than your own. Your own. And if you knew that, you would be a good salesperson. It was one of the key things. And that put me in very good stead my whole sales career, that you almost didn't have to sell yourself if you knew your competitor's product, i.e. the industry and where it's at. So know what you're talking about. But essentially, it's just about doing the right thing by people. And having integrity, being able to call a spade, and having compromise and compassion and, attention to detail and back yourself what you know in your work. I see a lot of trades out there that, in carpentry and waterproofing that just are always banging on and dissing everyone else, dissing volume builders and bagging the local fencing guy that put up the boundary fence and the renderer, bagging them and whatever. I've never had to do that. I've never focused on that. If you sell yourself, be yourself and back yourself. And that includes back your knowledge, your skill set, your professionalism and your pricing. That's the first thing. I don't give discounts. I don't knock anything off my pricing at all, regardless of the size of the project. And I sort of say, this is in the background as a baseline. This is what I'm worth. This is what this job is worth.
Yep.
And I will sign my name on that job.
Yeah.
And if you want my home address, you can have it. And if there's a problem, and if I say it's good to go for the next 10 years, you know where I live. I will come, make sure it's good to go. So if you do that, essentially, and I know that's an extreme case, but if you do that, you don't need to worry about the guy next door that's not doing it right, or you know what I mean? You kind of, and people, I think generally, they pick up on that. In my case, they pick up on that, and you walk out of there and you've done your job, you know?
Yeah. This is a sweeping, broad statement, right? But generally speaking, if you pay good money, generally speaking, you get great results. If you pay shit money, you can guaranteed that the corners are being cut left, right, and sideways. As you mentioned earlier on in this episode, in this conversation, no waterproofing on a balcony, no waterproofing in a bathroom. And we're not talking 30 years ago.
No.
We're talking in the last 5 years, for Christ's sake.
And how on earth that got a certificate of occupancy?
Well, yeah. Who is the building surveyor that signed off on that?
Yeah.
Where are they?
No idea.
Where do they live?
No.
Who are they?
And it not even Sky-On or cement, like just exterior ply with tile adhesive, no falls, or a big bow in the middle of it. And that was the issue, obviously. But you're like, porcelain, ceramic, cementitious or grout it's all porous material, It's
absolutely.
There's no waterproof to it at all, basically. And you're like this is back in the 1800s, this might have been all right, but you know what is going on here? And yet the homeowner's stuck with this $40,000 bill from us.
Yeah,
that they've just bought the house 2 years ago. So, it's what you said about, sort of that value. If you pay decent dollar, within reason, if you pay decent dollar, you should be getting a decent product, and vice versa. I mean, it only makes sense, doesn't it? But the percentage of people out there that just don't seem to get that. They don't seem to.
There's sorry to cut you off, but there are other things that need to fit into that bucket too, right? It's not just about pay top dollar, expect a great result. You need to still have your contracts and your checks and all sorts of other things that form part of that recipe to ensure that the dollars that you're putting out are giving you what you expect.
Right. There's other factors, yeah.
Yeah, or at least are compliant with the Australian standards for waterproofing and or carpentry and or tiling, whatever it might be. Then they're not there to make people's jobs harder. They're designed and created to have a guideline of what is the most effective way to do a job that's going to last the lifetime of the job that you're doing.
Exactly right. It's through experience, right? Prior trial and error, right? That's the theory. I mean, that's how we've arrived and evolved everything in this world, right? It's through making the mistakes in the past. And, we have this massive issue. One of the biggest issues ongoing right now currently that we have is this water stop, and the fact of the vertical leg on the water stop's got to protrude 5 mil above, depending on the application or the situation, or flush with. And like if you're looking at a walk-in or a hobless shower without a drop, like customers don't want that. No. Dumping marble on the floor, or and they're like, they don't want a little silver channel running through they don't have a shower door. It's a walk-in shower. So this is, one of the issues we have. And where it's at the moment is that you've got the builder that instead of saying, this is going to be an issue here, this is going to be a sticking point with this contract or this customer, I'm going to have to go there and try and explain this. And the builder, he's not a qualified waterproofer, so he doesn't really know what he's talking about either. And the guy that he gets to do the waterproofing, because he doesn't require a certificate of requirements, is his tiler, who's not qualified either. But it's okay, because if he does the waterproofing, the builder's got the DBU, so he'll just sign off on it that it's cool. But neither one of them really know what's right and what's not right. And the builder just wants the build to happen. And when the client says, no, I don't want that in the middle of my floor, or it's going to affect the cut of the tiles or the lay pattern of the tiles, the builders just wants the slip, the quickest way home. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So in the end, as it stands today, they don't put the water stop in. So when I go in there and I say, you can't do that, or you can't tile that, or I work with the tiler, and I say, well, that's not going to happen because it's got to do this or it's got to do that. You get that issue where you say, oh, well, the builder says that his tiler will do it, and he says, and all this sort of stuff. And it's just
everyone's opinions all of a sudden are the Australian standard, and that doesn't work. So, Grant, managing profitability can be one of the toughest parts of running any business, especially contracting and trade business. Sort of from your experience, what have you learned, or what strategies have you implemented to ensure that your business is both profitable and long-term sustainable?
Oh, well, there's lots of things I guess you can do, and it's probably an area that I could do much better than what I do. But I think at its core, I think knowing your worth is one way to, or a sure way to know or make sure you stay ahead of the game. So, as I said earlier, Mark, I don't do discounts. You know, I know what I'm worth, and I'm willing to back that and stand behind that for as long as I sort of stipulate that I will. And that always will keep that margin there, you know. So,
is there a number you work to? Like, I mean, without giving away your secrets, because we don't want to do that.
No, well,
everybody has that, you know, and everyone has expenses in life, and they have to live, and they have mortgages and cars and overseas holidays and trips and things that, you know, they're trying to fit in. And like, as you mentioned earlier, being a single father, you know, raising kids and that sort of stuff as well. And I know that firsthand as well, because I've got 3 myself. Yeah. Thankfully, they're now all grown up. There's still a cost, but it's just not as much
forever.
But it's always a cost. It's a cost forever.
Yeah.
But you know, how do you make sure that every week it's working for you and for your life?
Well, the reality is, mate, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I don't know that, and what I do know is that every week it hasn't worked. Or there's been weeks where it hasn't worked, and as I said, it's not probably one of the strongest areas, you know, of my business sort of toolkit. But I guess we work to, you know, when we talk about carpentry, they're kind of similar, but they're not in a lot of ways. But there are guidelines, or there's sort of templates or plans you can work to. You know, I mean, estimating for a small player like myself, you know, estimating software can be incredibly expensive, and can be also incredibly costly. Time consuming as well. So we tend not, you know, we have a few, or I have a few systems in place which sort of spit out some things that we can base numbers off. But I see every job as being quite individual and specific. You know, I mean, if you look at, you know, carpentry, you know, access is a big thing. Location's also a big thing. These are all factors that are variables that change from job to job. You know, even the time of the year can make a massive difference. You know, waterproofing winter is a complete different kettle of fish to waterproofing, especially in summer. Especially, that's from one extreme to the other. Especially in Melbourne, and especially exterior waterproofing. Like, they are different ball games altogether, and they both got their pros and cons. But essentially, you know, the let's face it, time is money, isn't it? I mean, it's when we're talking about work, time is money.
Absolutely.
And absolutely, and you just can't. I don't think, certainly with waterproofing, you know, there are some aspects. In answer to your question, I don't quote any job based off a square meter, a linear meter rate, or a time period rate at all. So I don't run the whole 85 an hour, or I don't run the whole, you know, 110 a square meter or anything like that. It's not possible, you know. So I set my pricing up as a fixed all-in-one price with only a couple of real disclaimer or footnotes to that. And that is things that are sight unseen, things that are variables that I know at that time I can't determine. So things like internal walls and things that are structured. You know, we run an infrared camera or thermal camera over a damaged property or bathroom or area. We can run moisture meters prior to and all that sort of stuff. But I've got no way of knowing if, you know, bottom plates are rotted out, if floor joists are given way, stumps are gone. Like, how would I know that? You know, so those things, you know, we have a set sort of terms and conditions, I guess you call them, invoicing or job terms and conditions. And we really have to sort of call on those. We do no dramas with variations and additions and changes and things like that. That's fine. That's a separate thing. But, I clearly state and almost proud of the fact I say to the customer, I'm not the cheapest going around. So if you're looking for cheaps, I'm not going to go into price war with anyone. If you want to go with them because price is what it is, no problem at all. I wish you all the best. That's completely fine. But I'm here to talk about me and GD Houseworks and Steelworks. And this is my price. And this is why my price is what it is.
Yep.
And why I think you should go with me. Essentially, that's it. And that I tend to give them, what I also see a lot in the construction industry is this sort of, $20,000 bathroom renovation that, is, let's just say, a 4 to 6 week turnaround time, and they get past the demo stage and they get into, the framing stage or whatever the case may be, or modification or a few structural changes. And all of a sudden the costs, you've got, it's going to be an extra $900 for this and an extra, that's not how I do my business. I said, it's going to be $26,380 all inclusive. I'm not worried about $100 here and there. If we have to open up, if the niche will fit there without a lintel across the top a little bit wider, all good. You can have a wider niche. That's no dramas, no extra cost or anything like that. Yeah. The only changes to the final balance payable on job completion will be down the bottom of this invoice, these conditions, terms and conditions, because I can't determine those right now. And that's it, and I set a price. That allows me also to know what's in the bank. I sort of know that profitability at that point, give or take, obviously. And I sort of know where I'm at. But it's very manual, when you're not a big player, I guess, databases and systems and prior jobs, I don't have item numbers on our invoices. So, because they're just not, hanging an entry door, let's just say, or putting a new door frame in for a customer's house at a door could be completely different to the next job that's done that. So I can't, have door 001 at set price. It's just not possible. And
it's all tailored.
Totally. And you have these automation systems which link into, Xero or MYOB or something like that. But single parent, trying to run a business, trying to be on the tools, trying to do this, when am I going to have time to do that? Exactly. I can't even.
There's a lot of priorities there, trying to squeeze it all in and get the best out of everything that you're putting into it.
And it runs pretty much, where is the database? Where is the pricing schedule? Where is the maintaining the margin? It's in here. And that's not efficient. That's not the best option around. That's not foolproof. That's not good. I'm not comfortable with that. I don't want it to be like that. I'm a guest on your show, but there's so many areas of my personal and business life that I've learned, even from listening to your guests, learned so much. I'm far from perfect. I fail or I stumble every day. In both personal and work. So I can learn a hell of a lot from, and have in the past, a couple of tips from, even in the last couple of episodes I've listened to yours and thought, maybe that's going to probably work or help me. Sorry, I'll just turn that off. Work or help me as well. But it's just, and as I said, I've made that error a few times, and it's usually to do not so much with costing or material costing, it's to do with time.
Yeah.
That underestimating of how long a job's going to take. And it's as simple as that. We're working a 143 meters of colour-bond fencing at the moment from a paling fence, and the job's 4 days over at the moment. And it's 4 days over because I just really didn't think about factoring the tree roots that are going to be there, and knowing sort of the species of tree and knowing you're going to have issues here. So it's taken us, an hour to dig out by hand tree roots in certain coast holes that we need, and just didn't factor it in. So, and that's at my cost, so that's because I do offer that all in one final fixed price, I'm not going back and saying we've spent an extra 4 days here. That's not what I've built my business on. When I gave you the quote, you said you'd had someone a few $1,000s less, but you went with me because I said to you, I'm not going to add anything to this, and I'm not going to come knocking on your door at the end of every day saying there's an extra this and extra that. It's about that integrity. Sort of saying, so the customer sees you there 5 days more working your team than you said you would be, is probably worrying about, do I have to pay for these guys or not? And then when I say, you're happy, everything's all good and the job's finished, they sort of, you've won them for life because you sort of, you've shown that integrity. You've lived up to what you said. You were there for an extra 4 or 5 days. There was no extra cost. There were complications, just like you promised them before you took their deposit, So it's just going through and doing what you say you're going to do, essentially. Yep. That's how I've built my business. It might not work for everyone.
Yep.
That's all I know. Because
but sharing today's and being a guest on a podcast like this is all about sharing your experiences so that people can, learn from others and decide.
Like I have from your guests. Yeah, the same like I have from yours.
Yeah. Decide whether or not they want to apply it or not apply it, or
there's more than one way to skin a cat, right, Mark? There's more than one way to skin a cat. Yeah,
100%. And sort of, and just on that, so looking ahead, and sort of, just as we wrap up today, I mean, where do you see the biggest opportunities in the waterproofing and construction industry in the next 5 years?
Mandatory licensing.
Do you think that'll fix it?
Yeah, I do. In as far as opportunities, I do. Because think about it this way, right? So and I'll talk about my personal experience here because that's all I can really be sure of or tell you honestly with no filter how it works for me or how it's sort of worked for me, is that, when I identified that there was clearly a big void in the industry and people not only doing it wrong, but everything about it was pretty much wrong. And it would be quite rare that you'd find everything that was done right. And I don't mean just about the product selection or the application or the effectiveness or product performance. I mean, about the whole process, about, that you had painters that were waterproofing, still today, you got gardeners that are waterproofing. It's ridiculous. So, and you can still DIY, I believe, up to 10 square meters by yourself. So go to Bunnings and get your Cromwell or whatever you want to get down there, or Bastion or whatever it is. And where, as far as your opportunity is concerned, this is how I see it. So I started, when I got my Cert 3 on my waterproofing qualification, I went there down to Chisholm, Steve Beaumont. I was lucky enough to get class or in Steve Beaumont's class down there at Chisholm, who's I think is the head of the waterproofing teaching down there now. And that was a godsend. Yeah, he's an absolute guru, and I've got a lot to thank him for where I am today. But it was with the intention of, with my fingers crossed, that mandatory licensing in Victoria was, because they'd spoken about it, and carpentry I think was the first one that was supposed to come in, but that. Once I knew the numbers and the scales being out that we spoke about earlier, I was like, I'm gonna, because these courses are pretty much free at the moment as well, and I was like, I'm gonna get a qualification because I'm hoping I'm gonna need one to do this, because you won't be able to waterproof without a qualification. And in that sense, why I say that is because the builder that you're doing the waterproofing for won't be able to get domestic builders insurance, DBI insurance, unless he's using a qualified waterproofer that can provide a certificate of compliance, which will all be mandatory. No different to an electrician or plumber. No different. Same system. Needs to be the same system. So whether or not it's got to do with safety or not is irrelevant. It needs to be a very similar system and geared the same way. So I guess for me, it was about preparation. Because when it comes in to effect, hopefully, and let's face it, look at New South Wales, there's other states that are already putting the crunch hard on waterproofing. And licensing, having in New South Wales the BBLWE's contractor's license, so that it follows. And then when you talk about opportunities, all of the divvy builders, all of the tilers, qualified or not, all of the gardeners and any other Tom, Dick and Harry won't be able to waterproof those jobs. New or existing won't be able to take those jobs on, will not be able to complete those jobs or undertake those jobs. There's a huge influx of opportunity right there of people, builders, developers, customers, anyone, because the flow-on effect, which I think will happen, and it's got to happen, I can't see how it won't, is that your homeowner that goes and renovates their bathroom, that RACV or AAMI, they're going to request a waterproofing certificate as well. No different than if you go and you go and do a big amount of electrical work to your house and say, oh yeah, we've just spent, by the way, we need to up our insurance policy because we've just spent X amount of dollars on all this electrical redone through the house and new switchboards and RCDs and all that sort of stuff. So, okay, all good. Can you just flip us the, I don't think you have to actually hand it to them, but you've got to keep it on hand in case there's a claim, right? So,
of course,
same thing's going to happen. So all of the tilers out there, what are they going to do? They're either going to stick to tiling, anything that's laying around, which is the bulk of the work left, it's going to be limited to the waterproofers that are qualified. Now, if you've had those 2 or 3 years digging in deep and doing the hard yards, and now you've got the experience and somewhat a name, which is Steelworks, what I'm trying to build, you're going to be hopefully in the perfect strike while the iron's hot position to take on. It'll be an issue with keeping up with expanding will be the issue to go. Yeah. So, and not only that, but on the flip side of things, that let's just say that there's a substantial percentage of those unqualified people that have been doing waterproofing that, and they may be great waterproofers that now can't because they do not have a qualification to do it, and in turn a license to do it. They're going to be rushing to go to TAFE. So I doubt you're going to find free TAFE for waterproofing happening at that time when you've got tens of thousands of people trying to all cram in, and good luck trying to get in pretty quick. Yeah. There's just going to be no vacancies around. So there's your opportunity there, and I think by the time that happens, certainly in Victoria, if you've got a couple of years under your belt and you've done your waterproofing qualification, your Cert 3 already, if it's your thing, it's your thing. Waterproofing is not a lot of fun. I don't find it like carpentry. Building shit's fun. Waterproofing is not, especially detailing. It's not a lot of fun, and my brain's already thinking ahead. And that's why I guess I network or try and have these relationships with manufacturers or product manufacturers, is that I'm trying to think of ways or devices or ways we can increase or decrease the detailing time. Preparation and details everything. Rolling out liquid membrane is easy, that's so quick, but detailing, because let's face it, that's the weakest point. If it's going to fail, it's usually going to fail there. And I don't know how we can speed that up. We've just made the move from, fabrics and Leicester proof bandages and bond breakers right through, and now we're using the butyl tape now and we have saved some time with that. I'm not worried about cost factor. It is considerably more, but that's not the factor. You make that up in the time, but it's still time consuming, even though you're like, well, you don't have to lay down a wet coat first, and you don't have to impregnate the bandage, and you don't have to wait for the bond breaker to cure and all that, or skin and all that sort of stuff. But for some reason, it still seems to take so long, So, and it depends. You can't quote, as an example, your question. You see, you can't quote a lineal. I see people on the internet and on some waterproofing forums and Steve's waterproofing industry, which I think I've seen you on there before, network on Facebook, that they're after a square meter, a run of the mill baseline square meter quote price on waterproofing. I'm like, how can you do that? It's impossible. You don't know how many windows, where they're positioned, there's just so many things, and they don't really.
It's one of the variables.
Yeah, niche will take you, if you detail with care, it literally will take you another 2 hours to do that job just for a hole in the wall, and it's and people say, oh, you just run a bit of silicone around. Well, that's the core problem with the whole waterproofing industry. It's not just a bit of silicone around. So that's why they fail. So Yeah. So that's a
Well, Grant, that's all we've got time for today. I mean, you've been a fabulous guest. I really appreciate you sharing as much as what you have, and kudos to you for being a mature-aged industry person and getting involved in it and moving into the space. We certainly need a lot more people to pick up the tools, so to speak, over the next couple of decades. A lot of construction to occur in Australia, in every state, particularly in Queensland where I am.
Yeah.
Mate, obviously we love connecting in our community with our guests when they come on the show. What's the best way for anybody from the community to reach out to you? How do they connect? Is it social media platforms, emails, websites? What do they do?
Yeah, we have very limited social media, and that's an area. I think we've spoken about this in the past. It's an area that I definitely know it's the leading area, so that will be happening this year. But for the time being, you can visit us at www.gdhouseworks.com.au, and you'll find a link there to our Steelworks website there as well, which is just a new one's being launched in the next week. And there's an email contact form through there, or you can contact me direct on 0491 111 158. Just don't make it after midnight. I'm usually sleeping.
But happy to no drunk dials.
No. Drunk poppy calls. But I'm also happy to anyone out there. I am passionate about in relation to waterproofing. Just free of charge to give advice. I don't claim to know everything because I don't, and that's for sure. And I'm working towards becoming a master trades waterproofer, what I would consider a master trades waterproof, but I'm no expert, but I'm happy to share any advice, and I tend not to speak about things that I don't know about. So if I have something to say to them, it'll be because of experience or that I kind of know what I'm talking about. But happy to give any of your viewers some free advice, because there's lots of questions out there, that's for sure.
Well, mate, thanks again. As we start on every show, until next time, stay connected and be safe out there, mate, and keep building your own business in this crazy world we call construction.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Tiling Connect. Don't forget to rate and review this podcast. To see more of Tiling Connect, jump on our socials and follow us via LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook. If you'd like to be part of the show, email us at tilingconnect@gmail.com. Until next time, stay connected.